just to fill people in on this conversation, tell us more about how we're defining this term meaningful work.
Work is meaningful when it provides more than a paycheck, right? So meaningful work is not necessarily about what we do, but rather how we experience work. So community, contribution, and challenge are the 3 C's that make work meaningful. Most people find work meaningful when that work connects us to others, so builds community. We feel part of the community. When that work makes a difference, we know the impact that we're making, so we have a sense of contribution. And when it helps us grow, when it provides challenging opportunities that support our development.
What we've observed, especially over the last 5 years since we started this research, is this huge movement towards meaningful work. People are so much more vocal about demanding meaning at work, having jobs, like Tamara said, that are more than a paycheck, that actually mean something to other people.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We are in season 9 of the podcast. There's over 265 episodes now, which is absolutely crazy and hard to believe. So if you are new to the podcast, welcome in. So glad you're here. And if you're one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, then so glad this continues to add value to your life, to your work. My commitment to you, as always, is I want this to be a place where you can step back, where you can think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and in your work, and hopefully have a little bit of good oxygen breathed into you so that you can think about the next steps and where you are in your journey. So glad you're here. And again, if you're new, just Google my name and whatever topic around leadership and culture and any of the things that are interesting to you. And with 265 episodes, you'll probably find something that hopefully is interesting to you. And so glad you're here. If you'll do me the quick favor before we start today, if you will, of course, rate the podcast 5 stars. I keep being told over and over again, I'm supposed to tell you that every time. 5 stars on whatever platform you use. If you'll write an authentic review in your own words, whatever resonates with you and in the world that we're in right now, if these messages have any redeeming value, then tell people about it. So I appreciate if you do that. And then obviously every time you share the podcast, whether that's with your team, your colleagues, your friends, you say, hey, here's an episode we ought to listen to and think about and talk about the questions. Those are all the ways that this authentically spreads. And I'm very appreciative for everybody that takes the time to do that. I am very excited to invite my guests for today into this chat in just a minute. In fact, they were on 5 years ago. We just figured it out, and excited to have them back. So they're no strangers of the pod. But Wes Adams is the CEO of SV Consulting Group, who partners with Fortune 500 companies to develop high-impact leaders and design operating structures and high-performing teams. Tamara Myles is an accomplished consultant, author, and international speaker with experience helping leaders improve business performance. Both Wes and Tamara are researchers and instructors of positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and their co-author book that you're going to hear more about today and also see in the show notes coming out in April, called Meaningful Work, How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee, is coming out, and we're going to talk about it very soon. I've enjoyed their work for many years and have had them on the pod in the past, like I said. And Tamara has been a guest at my Thermostat Cultures Live event for a number of times. So you might be familiar with her name and this work as well. But obviously, meaningful work in creating cultures that people feel connected and compelled to be a part of is my passion too. So I'm very excited to welcome back to the pod Wes and Tamara.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us again.
So fun. You were one of the first supporters of our research when we first published the qualitative research 5 years ago. you had us on the podcast to talk about it. And 5 years later, and 5 years of research later, we're back. So we're so excited.
That's really exciting. And remember when we were going to write that book by the end of that year and have it out?
Well, sometimes it just takes a little time. You guys, there's so much research, there's so much stuff, and sometimes it just takes a little while. But I'll just say to you right off the bat, like, congrats to you, because anybody that has written a book, which I'm fortunate that I've had that experience a number of times now, but anybody that has knows that's a heavy lift, and it takes more time than you think, and certainly to do it right and to do it well. And thoughtfully, as I know you guys have, it takes some time. So congrats. That's super wonderful.
Thank you.
I think, you're totally right about how hard it is to write a book. And everybody told us that before we started, and how difficult it was going to be and how long it was going to take. And I don't know about Tamara, but I don't know that I fully believe them. And I think there's such a parallel between like becoming a leader and becoming a writer. It's a completely different set of skills than something you've done before. Like, just because you know the content really well doesn't mean you know how to write about the content really well. Or just because you're really good at being an accountant, being an engineer, doesn't mean you're good at being a leader of accountants or engineers. And so for me anyway, it was a real learning curve. And I have such a huge respect for you and for everyone else who's ever written a book, because it is a massive undertaking. And I wouldn't have gotten here if I hadn't had an incredible partner to lean on the whole time. So,
well, you guys have made a great team, and that when you write something, you hope anybody reads it and cares about it. So let's talk about it a little bit and hear more about it. So to help listeners, again, I know there will be people that are going to be certainly listeners of mine that have been with this pod for a while that will be familiar with this term around meaningful work. And certainly I've tried my best to name drop and cite your research over the years. But just to fill people in on this conversation, tell us more about how we're defining this term meaningful work.
Yeah. So work is meaningful when it provides more than a paycheck. Right. So meaningful work is not necessarily about what we do, but rather how we experience work. And so most people find work meaningful when that work connects us to others. So builds community. We feel part of the community. When that work makes a difference, we know the impact that we're making. So we have a sense of contribution, and when it helps us grow. When it provides challenging opportunities that support our development. So community, contribution, and challenge are the 3 C's that make work meaningful.
I love it. And I'm interested, before we dive into those 3 C's, is I certainly know what I'm observing and experiencing and reflecting on quite often in what's happening in the workforce today and across workplaces. But I'm interested in not just as we talk about the content of the book, but kind of the why of the book, and kind of why is it even important at the times that we're in right now? What do you see that's happening across workplaces that might be, you might categorize it as alarming in some way, or you might also say, because I can certainly identify some things that I see as, that's a bit alarming of these trends across workplaces, but then also see that there's great opportunity for places to improve things. What is it that you all are seeing from that kind of big, high level perspective?
Yeah, I think there's this, what we've observed, especially over the last 5 years since we started this research, is this huge movement towards meaningful work. People are so much more vocal about demanding meaning at work, having jobs, like Tamara said, that are more than a paycheck, that actually mean something to other people, where they have opportunities to learn and to grow. And that's critical, because the research shows that meaning is the upstream factor that drives all of the outcomes that we want, both as business leaders and as employees. We have higher well-being, more satisfaction. We do better work when we find our work meaningful. And also at the organizational level, we're delivering higher creativity, more innovation, better bottom line revenue. So, this is something that's really a win-win. And, I think there's certainly a little bit of a crisis in the first C of community with all of us, moving to hybrid and remote work. It's harder to build relationships. And yeah, there are some other, compounding factors as well. You've got AI, you've got, some kind of massive changes that are happening at the national level right now, which have got everyone in a very uncertain place, regardless of where you stand on all of those things. So, there's a lot going on.
Tamara, how about you? What do you see that as you look at the landscape across workplaces that where this work seems to be, again, maybe fitting a need and a thirst that we see, or just, again, further opportunities to do things better? What is it you see?
So one of the most startling statistics that always sticks with me is that 9 out of 10 people are willing to take a more meaningful job somewhere else for less money. They're willing to trade meaning for money. 90% of people. That's a lot. 9 out of every 10 people. And that stays with me. And they're willing to trade 25% of their lifetime earnings, not just like this job, but lifetime earnings for more meaning. So that is really an alarming trend. It's a startling statistic. And I think it's really eye-opening for leaders to just understand that that's what people want, And then I think from the opportunity standpoint, because I think there are like two sides of the same coin, the alarming trend and the opportunity. Because when we see data like this that shows us exactly what people are wanting, we can turn to the other side of the coin and say, okay, what's the great opportunity here? And what we found in our research with, thousands of people across industries is that meaning happens in moments that matter throughout the day. So it doesn't have to be a whole reorganization and a complete starting from scratch. It's about these moments that really matter throughout the day.
Yeah, it's I see, and I'm sure you all are certainly familiar with all this research as well, but I see things that bubble up, at least in my brain, and I watch across the landscape of the workplace today. But things like Gallup's research recently saying that only 23% of employees feel like they trust their leadership and the future direction of their organization, where only 20% of employees say they feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% of them say that's exactly what I want. Right. So we're in this very low trusting environment. We've heard the statistics around loneliness in the workplace, and a lot of it, Wes, as you pointed out, is the remote work and certainly the challenging times we've had over the last few years, but loneliness has never been at a higher point. So we have this very low trusting, almost isolated environments in so many ways, and yet the opportunity side of it is what I believe the research and what humans are telling us is that they want to engage. They want organizations, they want leaders that are actively building trusting relationships with them, that there's clarity on the direction of where they're trying to head. And then there's an intentional strategy of how are we engaging people in that community and shaping the culture, in my language, setting that temperature. What are we strategically going to go do that creates an environment where that meaning is? So I see not only that we're in a very thirsty world for what it is that you all are talking about, but also there's just such great opportunity. So tell us a little bit more about these. The book is I know designed around, or at least the meat of the book is around kind of these 3 C's that you mentioned around community, contribution, and challenge. What would you share? I know you're going to give us just the kind of Cliff Notes version, but what would you share about what are you seeing in terms of the best places that are creating this, or what do we need to do to create that community, that contribution, and that challenge? But before we dive into that, let's take a quick break. Let's pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. But what would you share about, what are you seeing in terms of the best places that are creating this, or what do we need to do to create that community, that contribution, and that challenge?
I'll kick us off with community, and then Wes can take over. So community is really about feeling like you belong in the organization and you can show up authentically. So community says, I matter here, right? It's about feeling valued, feeling connected, feeling seen. And so one really powerful question that we asked in our research to get to that feeling of community was, do you know what's happening in your employees or your team's lives outside of work? And then when we were researching the employees, we asked, does your leader know what's happening in your life outside of work? Right? And so if you're a leader listening to this podcast right now, do you know what your team did this weekend? Do you know what book they are reading, or the last book they love? Do you know their spouses' names, or what sports their kids play? This makes such a huge difference in feeling seen and showing up authentically, in building that trust that you talked about. That's so important in relationships. And so an organization, the organizations we studied are exemplars in making this happen, and so they are really intentionally fostering these cultures of meaning where people can experience community, contribution, and challenge. And one that I will point out is HubSpot. It's a shiny example. We tell lots of amazing stories in the book, but they were so intentional about building community, obviously before the pandemic, but even during the pandemic, when most organizations were responding to work from home and new technology and whatever, and like crisis management, they were doing that, but they were also taking care of their people. They realized, for example, that they had a community of people struggling with addiction that had been separated from their support networks. And so they set up a fireside chat with an author that, supports people struggling with addiction. And then they also realized, oh my gosh, parents of young kids, or if kids are at home now trying to work and manage kids' schooling. So they hired an entertainer to do free concerts for kids so the parents could get a break for an hour. And so it's these thoughtful moments of understanding that these individuals that come to work are individuals with whole lives, and trying to see them and value them for what they are and make those connections. So that's community, the first C.
Which I love, by the way, and then Wes, I'll let you kind of jump in and continue us there. But what I love, and I hear, and again, my listeners will be familiar with this, but what I'm hearing you say is that these exemplar kind of leaders and organizations take this posture of listening, where they are part of the community building, is listening and understanding what is going on within the community. And then this proactive sense of, okay, what can we do to actually help enhance what they might be looking for, needing? How can we support them in some ways? So this kind of posture of listening and this proactive, what are we going to do to breathe oxygen into this community, in some of those examples that you just shared. How about Wes, the contribution and the challenge side of things? What would you share about that element of this meaningful work?
Yeah, I want to talk about contribution, but first I want to actually jump back to something you said earlier, which was about
please.
people being thirsty for meaning and about essentially needing leadership on that front, right? They're looking to leaders to help create these environments. And I think that's such a critical point because our research is all about providing leaders with the tools to be able to create environments where there are more moments of meaningful work. And, leaders account for about half of how meaningful we find our work. So there's a huge impact that leaders have here. And I think one of the reasons that we're struggling right now is because leaders don't have this toolkit, right? They haven't been trained to think about work in this way, to take this upstream approach to managing people and navigating organizations. And so, hopefully there are some practical tools that we're providing in this book,
and we have decades
fill that void
of research that tells us that we know people don't typically leave jobs; they leave bosses or managers, or quote unquote leaders. Right? We've seen this time and time ago for decades, and yet we continue to kind of try to operate in the same patterns. And so,
we don't provide leaders enough training. We don't teach them how to do these things in a more effective way. And so, I think that actually leads into one of the most powerful tips in contribution that I think we have. Contribution is the belief that your work matters to other people. So understanding that your work actually has a positive impact on your team, your colleagues, your organization, or potentially your clients or, other people in the community. And feedback is a huge part of understanding that our work matters to others, especially positive feedback. And this is something that leaders have almost complete control over, costs nothing, is very easy to do, very powerful, and totally underused. Every organization that Tamara and I work with, when we teach positive feedback methods, it's what we hear. Oh, yeah, I should be doing that more. Oh, I guess I'm not doing that enough.
Yep.
And Gallup and WorkHuman have recent research showing that one thank you once a week from a manager was enough to cut disengagement and burnout in half. One thank you once a week, right? And that same study showed that more than 60% of people didn't believe they were acknowledged enough for the work that they were doing, right? So there's just a simple, powerful way, just saying thank you, just taking a moment to tell people that their job mattered. We have one woman that we worked with who takes a few minutes every Friday at the end of the day, and she writes 5 what she calls gratitude notes to people on her team, just thanking them specifically for something that they did that week and letting them know why it mattered to her or how it impacted a client. And that is so powerful, especially if you can be specific. You can focus on the behavior that the person did, that positively impacted other people. And, when she started doing this a few years ago, she was nervous. She was like, oh, people are going to think it's weird if I'm, sending them thank you notes at the end of the week. And what she found was very quickly, they kind of organically multiplied. Other people started doing it, and it really changed the tenor of the conversations among the team and the way that they were collaborating with each other. And it just became such a powerful way to lift the culture overall.
That's a perfect example of a small culture shaping moment that when that flywheel gets moving, you write a couple and then you write a couple more. And then you start to notice that other people start doing that really over time, what you've created is a culture of positive feedback to people. And you're anchoring would be the language. You're anchoring that this is how we do what we do. This isn't just what we do. This is how we do it. And that helps set the temperature for the people around. That's an awesome, simple, but really, really great example of that.
HubSpot, actually, the company that Tamara just mentioned, does a very cool thing. They create gratitude jars at the beginning of the year. So if we were all on the same team, I would write you a couple of notes of gratitude on a piece of paper, throw it in the jar. And then anytime you want throughout the year, you can pull one out if you need a dose of, contribution. They've literally banked it so that you can just take it with you wherever you go. It's very cool.
That's cool. And how about challenge? So, again, and by the way, the theme that I'm hearing is this, 'cause starting tomorrow, what you talked about, a community, and then this idea of contribution is moving us from, I think, the traditional sense in many organizations is this kind of transactional relationship where I am hired, I am paid to be in a role, to do a job. And like my function here is this transaction. You've paid for me to do some kind of product or service, right? And moving from that, which once again, yes, we all have roles, we all have jobs, we have things that are being asked of us, but moving that mindset from that really transactional to this, what does it mean for me to be a transformational part of this community? And that it's not just about the transactional, pieces of my job that I do, but it is how I do my job that makes the contribution I make beyond just the widget or the service or the thing that I provided, but it's a part of that culture and that meaning of why we're doing what we're doing. And so that shift of the mind and why, how does the word challenge or this idea around challenge come into the research?
Yeah. So, we are at our best when we are feeling challenged but supported, right? When we're stretched and supported. And so the challenge is all about having a leader who believes in you and gives you these opportunities to grow. And the way we like to talk about it is that it's a leader having one hand on your back, kind of pushing you to be the best version of yourself. And the other hand, though, has to be under your arm, kind of supporting you as you navigate the trickiest terrain. So it's this idea of pushing and supporting at the same time that really, really makes work meaningful. When we were interviewing leaders in our qualitative study, we heard so many stories of, could have been decades ago or a few years ago, but these moments when people were so stretched and they weren't sure they could do something, but somebody believed in them so much and they had the support they needed. And it's just so inspiring. It's just so inspiring. I had a leader like that early in my career as a very young advertising executive in New York City. I had a leader, Madonna Barger, who kind of, we were getting ready for
Madonna Badger. That's a great name.
She's amazing.
Shout out to Madonna Badger out there.
And we were getting ready for a big client pitch. And on the morning of, traveling to go to the client, her daughter got sick, and she called me, 5 a.m. We were getting ready to go to the train station. And she's like, you just do it. You got it. And I was freaking out because I had never done a client pitch. I was like early 20s, you know what I mean? But I went on the train, I reviewed everything, and I was so nervous and worried about messing up this pitch for this new client. And, but I really wanted to do a good job. She believed in me. I didn't believe in myself at that point, but she did. And I had to really replace the voice in my head with her voice in my head. And it was amazing. I did it. I felt amazing after. I got great feedback. We got the client, I came, and just that moment of her believing in me and throwing me in that situation and giving me the support I needed was, I'm talking about it 20 years later as like such a special moment.
That's awesome. There's just these threads that I hear in everything that you're talking about, and certainly, again, knowing some of the research that you all have done, and certainly the spirit behind the work that you're doing. But this idea of engagement, obviously, of that people want to be engaged, and so we don't want to just be in isolation. And every time somebody just says, "Yeah, leave me alone. I just want to do my job," the reality is the research really doesn't back that up. That eventually people want to be engaged and they want to know that there's an authentic connection there. And then also this idea of like that it's a participatory world. And we, in so much of our lives outside of work, we operate in this kind of participatory world where we have a say and a choice in what it is that we do. And yet the best organizations are the ones that are helping to bring people into participation into that you are an ambassador for this culture and community that we're creating, and that your contribution to it matters, and that we want you to bring the very best of your skills to that. And oh, by the way, our role as a leader, as an organization, is to support you and challenge you and to help nudge you into spaces that maybe you wouldn't always go on your own, like that nervousness getting on the train to go give that pitch, but yet there's support and there's a nudge to help you get there. And so this engagement and participatory, that those words keep kind of echoing in my mind as I listen to you guys.
I think that's such an important point. I think underlying our existing model of organizations and management is this idea that people don't actually want to work hard, and they don't actually, if we leave them alone, they're not going to do anything. So we have to come up with this system of carrots and sticks to make sure that they do their job. And that's the Ford factory model that all of our organizations are based on, or have evolved from, right? And I think this is a real shift. And what we're seeing is that people want to reach their full potential. They want to work. They want to do a good job. They want to learn and grow. They want to achieve things in the world. They want to build connections, meaningful collaborations with other people. And a leader's job isn't to force them to do a task and compensate them for that. It's actually to enable them to do all of those amazing things that they want to do. Right. I think
help enliven them is to be a part of it. That's part of the leading, is like, I see something in you. I believe something in you. You are here for a special reason, for a contribution that I can't make. And so part of it is I have to create this culture that helps bring that out of all of us.
Yeah. Very, very well said. And I think exactly what Madonna did for Tamara in those early years, saw something in her that she wasn't ready to see in herself, right? Nudging us towards being better versions of ourselves and doing better work. And all leaders can do this. There's a toolkit, there's a playbook for this if we're willing to give some of these things a shot.
I love it. How about the two of you personally? This journey again of the research and the writing and all the work that you're doing in support of it. But where do you, at this current juncture, how would you articulate where you're finding meaning and maybe elements of those 3 C's in your personal work and connection to the spirit of this work?
I mean, I think it's all about the 3 C's, and maybe I'm very biased because I've been living in that world for 5 years. But, the community then the collaboration that Wes and I have had for 5 years with ourselves, but also with the leaders we work with and the students we teach, and learning from each other, but building those relationships and building that collaboration. So for me, that sense of community is huge, but also the sense of challenge. Like we said in the beginning, writing a book is hard, and there are tricky terrains, and we navigate and we learn, and gosh, it's been a learning experience, and we continue to learn, with the launch and all of that. And then with contribution, I think being able to see the impact that we have on the leaders we work with, and how that impact ripples out, to the people they lead, and they bring that home with them. Like, we truly believe, Wes and I do this because deep down, we believe very deeply that our workplaces are our biggest levers for improving well-being at a global scale. We have a background in positive psychology. We care deeply about well-being globally. Positive psychology is the study of happiness and well-being. And so we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else in our lives. We spend more time with our work colleagues than with, our family and friends. And work is one of the last places where different people from different backgrounds with different ideas come together to collaborate and work towards a shared goal. And so when work can be meaningful, when we experience community contribution and challenge at work, we bring that home with us. We are better partners and parents and family members. And then those people are happier, and they become better members of the community. And it really, truly ripples out. So that's my sense of contribution.
Just a world-changing, idea of, meaningful work. I love that.
Wes is like, I don't know, I had fun. Tomorrow's changing the world.
I 100% resonate with all of those things. And I think, to bring it down to something like very tactical and practical for a minute, all of that starts with recognizing those moments of meaning that are happening, whether we're doing it, whether our leaders are helping us do it. And I think for me, we've been so busy with our own work, with writing this book, with doing all of these things. And I find myself rushing from one thing to the next, day to day, one meeting to another, barely having time to think before I, click over to the next Zoom meeting or whatever. And no matter how great any of the things I'm doing are, if I don't stop to appreciate them, it just flies right by. And there's an exercise that we use in a lot of our workshops, and there's a template for it on our website called the Moments That Matter Canvas. And I realized a couple of weeks ago that I wasn't taking my own medicine, and I actually needed to be pausing, reflecting, and thinking about some of the things that I was doing in my own work. And so I've made a habit at the end of the day, or, at the end of most days, not every day, sitting down and just writing about one thing, taking a couple of minutes, writing about one thing that happened that day that was meaningful to me, whether it was I heard from somebody who was in one of our workshops that it meant something to them, or they felt like they could be a better leader, or, I had connected with a really interesting, colleague, or, or I learned something new that day. Right. And that taking that moment to reflect on the thing that happened that's meaningful is just really, really powerful.
No, I love it.
And that can change the world if we do a little bit of that every day.
Hey, well, one of the reasons why we connected in the first place, and why I'm still drawn to the work that you all are doing, and certainly want to support it in every way, is because I believe everything that you all just shared. And I do believe that our places of employment have the opportunity to be the biggest influencers on us, and for all the reasons that you all have named. Not only the time investment that we give to them, but the differing people that we cross paths with, and the contribution that I think we all can make. And certainly any listeners of this pod or any readers of my books in the past would recognize that what you're talking about is this. I've talked a lot about busyness versus effectiveness, and shifting our minds. Am I moving through my day, Wes, like you were just describing, of just in the busyness of the frenetic pace that we're running at, or am I truly stopping? And like my first book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim, to step back from the baggage claim and ask the question of, how is it that I want to move? Mm-hmm. And like, how do I want to travel through my life, through this world, and in my work and in my family and all of those things? And this idea then of saying that not only remembering these things and stepping back to have those moments, but then what is the temperature that I want to set? So what's that proactive effort? And then the reality is that it's an ongoing thing. And so I've got to continue to breathe oxygen into myself and hopefully into the people around me, because we get tired, man. And so we've got to find those spaces in our own lives, but certainly within the best teams and organizations that really bring that out in us. Lastly, I'll just ask you this. I know we're almost at our time, but I could talk about this stuff all day with you guys. But are there any? You named HubSpot. You've made other references along the way, but are there other organizations, businesses, teams, places that you're like, wow, we've seen the meaning, like it's just a part of the fiber of who they are and what they're doing? Are there any places that just come to your mind just to celebrate? Anything?
I would say a big one for me is Patagonia. We feature some of their folks in the book, especially their chief people officer, Teresita Richard, and they do an incredible job. One of the things we found in our research that surprised us a little bit was this idea of recruiting and onboarding, the idea that meaning begins before people start to work at the organization. If you are talking about your values and the mission of the organization during the recruiting process, that leads to a much more meaningful engagement with, the person that you eventually hire. And if you take the time, not just to get them a computer and to, get their forms filled out when they start, but culturally onboard them and help them build authentic relationships with people at the beginning. That has a huge ongoing effect for the entire time they're with an organization. And Patagonia, from the standpoint of really a values aligned recruiting process, talking about values, looking for aligned values or values add in the recruiting process. And then once people have joined the company, really taking the time to introduce them to other people. Oh, you need to meet these 6 people in your first 2 weeks, and here's what you're going to learn from them. And let me tell you, they have Vincent Stanley, who's been there for 50 years, right? One of the original folks at Patagonia. He's their director of philosophy, and he does presentations for all of the new hires talking about this is how the organization started, and here's what we believe, and here's an example of that, so that you're getting the origin story and you understand, how these values come to life and how the community comes together in meaningful ways. Just setting the stage like that is a really, really cool way to set yourself up for a meaningful career.
And I guess I'll add 2 more quick examples because they're really unexpected organizations where, people go and they find a lot of meaning. One is Calendly, the scheduling software organization. They're really intentional about.
We used it to schedule this.
Exactly.
I believe. So,
Exactly.
There you go, Calendly.
And so you might not think that's a place where people go to find meaning, right? They're designing software and selling it, or whatever the jobs are there. But there's a real intentionality behind. In the organization, behind connecting people's work with the impact that they have, because Calendly really is about saving customers hours and hours and hours of back and forth with scheduling. And so that's an organization that's doing a really great job. And another one that we feature just a little bit in the book, but is a great one, is Barry Waymiller. They are a manufacturing organization, and their CEO, Bob Chapman, is really, really intentional about what he calls human-centered leadership, which is all about creating meaning and mattering for people who work there. And so, meaning is not about the work that you do or the industry you're in. It's about how you experience it, and you can experience it in a retailer, in a manufacturer, in a software development company. You can find meaning, and leaders can help people find meaning in the jobs that they already have.
Every job, every day.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys sharing those examples, because we need to continue to celebrate and share places that are, and what I tell companies and organizations all the time is I'm yet to find the perfect place. Because I'm yet to find the perfect person. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I've never met the perfect leader. I've never met the perfect team, the perfect organization. But what I have met are people that are striving to do it even better tomorrow, and to create a compelling environment that people want to be a part of. And so there's the intentionality that the examples that you all just shared, they don't just magically happen. They are intentionally led and cultivated by the people within them. And then they're strategic about, this is the way we're going to hire, and this is the way we're going to onboard. And then it's not just about the logistics, but it is about that cultural onboarding, Wes, that you just named. And it's about, okay, how are we identifying emerging leaders throughout our organization? And are we going to wait for them to develop habits over 7 years, or are we going to be intentional about helping to support them and help them develop those habits and the skills and the training and the support that we think they need? And it's about the senior team, and it's about the managers, and what are we doing for performance evaluations and rewards and recognition and all of those things. You step back and look at it and you say, no. It's not by accident. It's with great intentionality and then strategy, that this is a part of not just what we do, but how we do it. And so I thank you guys for sharing that. And more importantly, I thank you all for the work that you're doing, and for you all to be taking this research and then sharing it with the world in a storytelling format and a tool to say, how can we help bring more meaning to your team, your organization, your business? So I really appreciate you guys being here. And what I'll say is that you all can, if anybody listening, you want to find out more about what they're into or find out more about the book, certainly check out the show notes today. But then also you can go to makeworkmeaningful.com, but check out the show notes. And we'll put some more information there that you can find out more to help support this great work. I look forward to our next chat together. You guys, always love hearing from you.
Let's not wait 5 years this time.
Yeah. Amen. So thanks you guys for being a part of this. I really appreciate you guys coming back on the pod, and I'm trying my best to support you along the way.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Great to see you.
Great to see you. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. I hope this has been one of those moments for you to step back and to hopefully be able to think about your life and to think about the work that you are involved with, and where do you contribute that kind of meaning, and how do you be a part of a community? What does that mean for you, and what does that contribution look like, and what's the next challenge that might be along your path? So all of these things are intentional. All of these things are about setting the temperature for our life and our work, and then having the courage to breathe oxygen into ourselves and hopefully breathe oxygen into the people around us, so that we can create workplaces that people want to be a part of, that leads to all of those results that you also heard us referencing. Is that's what it leads toward, is to higher performance results and all those things. So thanks for being a part of today. I hope this has breathed a little good oxygen into you. And I hope you remember that the future of leadership, the future of the cultures that we're going to create is you, is me, is us. We get to be those thermostats for other people. We get to breathe oxygen into creating those together. So step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.